Imagine standing at the edge of a shelter 100,000 years ago. The group is getting ready to move. Spears come off the ground. Children are pulled close. Someone smothers the last embers beneath ash. But one person is not leaving. They are curled beside the dying fire, shivering so hard they cannot get their legs beneath them. And on a flat stone nearby sits a strip of meat, crushed, softened, prepared by somebody else. Wait, why spend precious food on a body that cannot hunt, cannot fight, cannot even stand? There is no medicine here, no diagnosis, no guarantee that this person will ever recover. Only a choice. Carrying the weak makes life harder for the strong. Sharing your portion means accepting hunger yourself. Still, somebody stayed. Somebody split the food. Somebody looked at a sick human being and decided that sickness did not automatically mean abandonment. Not a cure, a commitment. Care existed before medicine had a name. So what changed inside the human mind when survival stopped meaning save yourself and started meaning save one another? The first treatment may have been only 3 words. Do not leave. Take away the tenderness for a moment, and care starts to look like a ruthless evolutionary calculation. A sick body still needs to eat. It slows the group down. It requires warmth, protection, and somebody else's attention in a world with no antibiotics, no food stocked for next week, and no rescue party coming over the ridge. So why not walk away? Because that body is more than another mouth to feed. Inside it may be the route to a hidden water source, the memory of the last brutal winter, the hands that know how to shape stone, the voice a frightened child trusts. If that person survives, they may contribute again. If they die, everything stored inside them disappears too. Not charity, a wager. Imagine giving up food today for strength that might return months from now, or might never return at all. That was the deeper evolutionary test. Could human beings invest in a future they could not see? Care leaves behind no spearhead, no blade, no carved monument. You notice it only when a body survives something it should not have survived. Before anyone became a healer, people learned to make adjustments. Someone carried food back to camp instead of eating it beside the kill. Someone picked a gentler route because one member could not manage the steeper ground. Someone stayed awake through the darkness while another person shook beneath a fever. No clinic, no medical language. Just time, calories, and protection being redirected toward one vulnerable body. That could happen because early human survival was already built around other people. Food moved from hand to hand. Predators were faced as a group. Children remained dependent on adults for years. Once life became a network, weakness could no longer belong only to the person experiencing it. If one hunter could not walk, somebody else carried more. If one parent could not gather food, another person fed the child. If one pair of eyes had to close, another pair remained open. The group kept the individual alive, while the individual carried knowledge the group might one day need. Strength flowed both ways. Wait, this is the point where healthcare starts looking less like a sudden invention and more like a way of organizing life. A group did not need a word for paralysis before changing its route for someone who could not walk. It did not need a theory of infection before bringing water to someone burning with fever. The first hospital may not have had walls. Healthcare began when weakness became everyone's problem. Our first clue lies beneath the ground at Dmanisi, Georgia, in layers dating back roughly 1.77 million years. Picture the southern Caucasus beneath a hard, cold sky. Meat is tough. Roots are stubborn. Every mouthful has to be cut, ripped, crushed, or ground down. Now place an older, early human in that landscape, someone who had lost all but one tooth years before dying. The jaw itself had changed. Bone around the empty sockets had been resorbed, which means the teeth did not fall out moments before death. This individual lived on long enough for the body to remodel itself. Despite lacking almost all the equipment needed to chew the food available in that world. How? Researchers have suggested several possibilities: soft animal tissue, marrow, tender plants, or food that other people processed first. Stone tools could slice flesh into smaller pieces. Pounding could loosen stubborn fibers. Fire was not essential. Cooperation may have done the job. But here's the problem. A fossilized jaw does not preserve the hand that prepared dinner. It cannot tell us whether someone patiently softened food for this individual, or whether that person survived by finding softer food alone. So we have to resist the neat, comforting version. One skull is not enough to give us a sentimental portrait of a loving prehistoric family. And yet, the survival itself is still there. One remaining tooth. Several additional years of life. A question that has waited almost 1.8 million years for an answer. The earliest form of care may not have resembled medicine at all. It may have been nothing more and nothing less than changing food so another mouth could still eat. More than 12,000 years ago, high in the mountains of southern Italy, another young person faced a completely different obstacle. We know her as Romito II. Recent genetic analysis identifies her as an adolescent girl who carried 2 altered copies of NPR2, a gene that plays a central role in bone growth. She stood about 110 centimeters tall. Her forearms and lower legs were severely shortened, while limited movement in her elbows and hands would have made travel, carrying, gathering, and repeated physical labor far more difficult. Imagine your group crossing broken limestone, squeezing through narrow valleys, climbing slopes made slick by rain. Everybody is carrying something: food, hides, tools, whatever the group cannot afford to lose. When the weather turns or the light begins to disappear, speed matters. Romito, too, could not become taller through effort. She could not will her limbs into matching everybody else's stride. Her body placed limits on her that determination could not erase. And still, she reached adolescence. Her nutritional condition also appears to have been broadly comparable to that of other people buried inside the cave. Now, that does not mean somebody had to place food directly into her mouth every morning. Care is not always so obvious. Sometimes it barely looks like care at all. It can mean choosing a pace she is able to maintain. It can mean giving her work that fits the movement available in her hands. It can mean somebody else picking up the weight her body cannot carry. Not pushing her outside of life, reshaping life so she can remain inside it. Romito II was buried in an embrace with Romito I, an adult woman whom genetic evidence identifies as a first-degree relative, perhaps her mother, perhaps her sister. Their burial cannot replay thousands of ordinary days for us. It cannot show who carried what, who waited on the trail, or who made room beside the fire. But it places Romito II inside a relationship, inside kinship, not beyond the edge of the human circle. And that matters because when we imagine strength in prehistory, we tend to imagine muscle. The fastest runner, the hardest thrower, the body that refuses to break. Yet a group can show strength in another way, by refusing to judge every person according to the exact same task. Could she gather plants, prepare fibers, keep a fire alive, watch children, remember routes, hold relationships together when conflict threatened the group? The archaeological record cannot hand us her daily schedule. And that uncertainty is not an invitation to invent a more comforting story. It forces us to confront how narrow our definition of contribution can become. A person does not have to perform every task to belong to the system that performs them all. The group adapted to the limits of Romito II, and her presence may have supported the group in ways no skeleton could ever preserve. Inclusion was not softness standing in opposition to survival. Inclusion was one of the tools survival used. If you're still with me, subscribe because the next case changes what human strength actually means. Now move forward to northern Vietnam, roughly 4,000 years ago, and into the Neolithic community of Mán Bạc. Seasonal rain turns the ground into mud. Fishing nets tear and need to be repaired. Pigs have to be fed. Daily life depends on hands, backs, balance, and bodies that keep moving. This was the world of a young man archaeologists call Burial 9. Researchers concluded that a spinal disorder caused juvenile onset paralysis involving all 4 of his limbs. He appears to have lived from adolescence into his mid-20s, roughly a decade with extreme limits on his ability to move independently. 10 years. Sit with that number for a moment, because it contains more than survival. It contains food placed within reach. Water lifted to his mouth. A body washed, turned, supported, and protected from injury. It contains care during floods, during shortages, during mornings when everybody was already tired before the work began. Why keep doing it? Because the group was never an abstract idea. It was a collection of actual people choosing, again and again, to do the same thing tomorrow. Not one dramatic rescue. Thousands of acts that nobody recorded. Somebody gave up minutes. Somebody gave up calories. Somebody gave up sleep. The work was spread across enough shoulders that one person's impossible life became possible. We do not know his name. We do not know what made him laugh, what irritated him, or what he may have offered through speech, memory, humor, companionship, or simple presence. Bones preserve evidence of dependence more easily than they preserve evidence of value. But his survival still tells us something no stone tool can say on its own. The people of Mán Bạc organized care across years. They turned patience into infrastructure. They turned repeated effort into protection. Long-term care is a technology made from other people's hours. But wait, does any of this belong to humans alone? Not exactly. Vampire bats return from feeding with their stomachs full of blood.
And a bat that failed to find a meal may receive some of that blood from another member of the colony. Researchers have observed this sharing between relatives and, in certain cases, between unrelated bats that have built stable social bonds over time.
So care did not suddenly blink into existence when one human placed softened food on a stone. Other animals share resources. They protect companions. They maintain relationships that can keep another body alive when it cannot manage alone. The simple story would be that humans invented kindness while every other species followed nothing but cold competition. Comforting. And wrong. Evolution contains rivalry and cooperation, abandonment and rescue, selfishness and sacrifice. The question is not whether another animal is capable of helping. The deeper question is this: what happens when the helping cannot stop tomorrow? What happens when it has to continue for 10 years? Care did not begin with humans. Humans changed its scale, its structure, and its duration. So compassion alone was never the breakthrough. A mother bat may share food. An elephant may remain close to an injured companion. A primate may groom, defend, or physically support another member of its group. Humans did not cross some invisible border where cruelty ended and kindness began. Not compassion. Coordination. A sick person might be protected because they were family. Maybe they knew where water could still be found during drought. Maybe they could shape a tool nobody else could make, calm a conflict before it became violent, identify a poisonous plant, or teach a child what the group had already learned the hard way. Care could be love. It could also be duty, memory, self-interest, hope, or all four at once. And there lies the deeper shift. Humans could notice a need before it became fatal. They could picture recovery before recovery existed. They could divide responsibility among several people, then remember who had agreed to do what when the next morning came. One person brought food, another carried water, someone else stayed awake through the night. Now imagine maintaining that pattern through rain, migration, hunger, injury, and another morning when nothing seems to be improving. The patient cannot repay you today. They may not repay you next season. They may never repay you at all. Still, the system continues, because responsibility no longer rests on one flash of emotion. It belongs to the group. A feeling may begin care. Only coordination can keep it alive. Before medicine became chemistry, it became memory, scheduling, and shared duty. Before a healer mixed plants or treated wounds, a community had already learned to bend its time around a vulnerable body. Medicine began as coordination before it became chemistry. And when your own body gives out, you step into that same ancient structure. The setting may look different. You may be lying beneath hospital lights instead of beside a fire. You may hear the rhythm of machines instead of wind moving beyond a shelter. But the arrangement around you is strangely familiar. Someone brings you water. Someone takes over the work your body can no longer do. Someone watches your breathing, notices a change, writes it down, and passes that information to the next person. Your nurse did not grow the food keeping you alive. Your doctor did not manufacture the medicine entering your bloodstream. The stranger whose donated blood may one day move through your veins could live hundreds of miles away and never hear your name. Yet all their actions meet inside your body.
That is what a hospital is. It is the ancient camp stretched outward until it contains laboratories, ambulances, blood banks, supply chains, operating rooms,
and people working through the night while you sleep. Wait, modern medicine did not free us from depending on other people. It revealed just how deep that dependence goes. You survive through specialists you never meet, through discoveries preserved by people who died before you were born, through routines repeated so carefully, so consistently, that they begin to feel automatic. But none of it is automatic. Every clean instrument, every recorded symptom, every meal left beside a bed represents somebody's attention, somebody's labor, somebody's time being redirected toward a body that cannot currently protect itself. Your body is individual. Your survival is collective. Now return to the flat stone beside the fire. A small piece of softened food rests on its surface. It does not look important. It is not a monument. It would leave nothing behind for a museum display. But hidden inside that meal are hours of hunting, calories that cannot be reclaimed, and risk carried by somebody who decided to share what they had earned. Imagine picking it up. Why should something so ordinary carry so much weight? Because inside that small act sits the earliest architecture of care. Not a drug, a decision. Not one powerful body conquering nature, but one vulnerable body surrounded by others. One pair of hands prepared the food. One memory noticed what the sick person needed. One human presence remained when walking away would have cost less. Your immune system is ancient. It recognizes threats, raises your temperature, closes wounds, attacks invaders, and fights for you from inside the body. But humans built another layer of defense beyond the skin. Hands that carry. Minds that remember. People who stay. Wait, perhaps that was the advantage, hiding in plain sight. We did not evolve into creatures that could never be wounded. We became creatures who were harder to lose. Across 100,000 years, the stone beside the fire became a bedside table. The shared meal became a treatment plan. The person watching through the night became a profession. The tools changed. The promise did not. Care was the first technology built from time. We stayed. We survived. Subscribe.